All right, thanks for joining us today. Welcome to this workshop we're doing virtually and recording it online. Hopefully you all get something out of this, and if you have questions after watching this recording, there will be contacts for both of the presenters at the beginning and the end of the presentation. So in this workshop, we'll explore the subject of farm stress, a subject that's affecting the lives of many farmers and their families. The material in this program was authored and designed by a multidisciplinary team at Michigan State University. Experts included social and emotional health educators, former farmers, agricultural educators, and other experts in the field. A list of authors and contributors is included at the end of this presentation. We intend this to be an online workshop with lots of resources available to you, and hopefully you'll take advantage of them. So the two presenters today are myself, Jeremy Daubert, and Cynthia Martell. We're the two dairy extension agents in Virginia, out in the field. I'm from Rockingham County, and Cynthia is based out of Franklin County. There's our contact, and we'll show that again at the end. If you have any questions after this, feel free to reach out to either one of us. So just a general agenda for today's workshop. We're going to go through some market updates and talk some about stress and how it affects you, and how to identify the symptoms of stress in yourself and others, how to communicate with somebody that's under a lot of distress, and some suicide awareness tools. So we're going to provide a lot of resources, some links, and a lot of information today that'll hopefully help you with yourself, your family, and any clients or friends that you work with. So the objectives for this workshop are to build awareness around potentially stressful conditions affecting some farmers, learn stress triggers, identify signs of stress, and review helpful techniques for responding to people that are under distress. Learn some techniques for identifying, approaching, and working with farmers who may not cope with stress effectively, and learn where to go for additional help. Again, we're not going to have all the answers here today, but we're going to provide a lot of resources for you, so hopefully you can find the answers you need if you don't get all your answers today. So farm stress, what do we know? The agrarian imperative was coined by Dr. Rossman. He's a clinical psychologist and a farmer. This imperative impels farmers to hang on to their land at all costs. The agrarian imperative instills farmers to work incredibly hard, to endure unusual pain and hardship, and to take uncommon risks. The land means everything to farmers. Losing a farm family is the ultimate loss. So farmers usually consider, their identity as part of the land. And this is one of the problems when farmers are under a lot of stress, especially financial stress, no matter what the reason is. They sort of consider their identity to be the farm, the land, the agricultural business itself. Most of us are aware that farming can be stressful, and that at least some of the farmers we know are confronted with more challenges, and some have more challenges than others. Farming can be hard on the body, and this can be seen in recent data. The CDC reports that in 2017, 416 farmers and farm workers died from a farm-related injury, resulting in a fatality rate of 20.4 deaths per 100,000 workers. This is actually a little bit better than 2016, but still really high. The typical cost of one tractor overturn is over $1 million, and most fatalities are from transportation incidents like this. Those who work in food production and processing have a significantly higher mortality rate than those in non-food industries. The highest number of injuries was among farmers aged 50 to 59. Every day, approximately 100 agricultural workers suffer an injury leading to lost work time. The annual cost of injuries, including medical costs and lost productivity, is about $8.3 billion. The National Institute for Occupational Safety and Health recently examined 130 occupations and found laborers and farm workers had the highest rate of deaths due to stress-related conditions, such as heart and artery disease, hypertension, ulcers, and nervous disorders. Opioid use and misuse are concerns for rural areas as well. About 3 of every 4 farmers say it would be easy to access opioids. And 1 in 4 reported they have taken an opioid without a prescription or have abused or been addicted to opioids. This is a growing concern in all rural communities. Making all this even more of a challenge, few rural communities in the U.S. have adequate medical infrastructure. A health professional shortage area is a federal designation showing a geographic area has a shortage in healthcare providers. In other words, supply of healthcare providers does not meet demand for medical care. When considering primary care, nearly 67% of HPSAs in rural and partially rural areas. When considering mental health care, almost 62% are in this category in rural areas. We all must learn to manage our stress levels and to reduce the effects of unwanted stress. Too much stress can make a person more accident prone and affect health and well-being. This is why it's important to identify common stressors, recognize the symptoms of stress, and manage stress. By doing these 3 things, you'll make the workplace a safer place. So here's one of the first resources we're going to provide today. Again, we hope to provide many resources for you. This is a handout on opioids in rural farming communities. And the 2 links, one of these is a link to this specific handout, and the other one is a link to another opioids in rural communities handouts. So for more information on specifically on opioids in rural communities, check out these 2 resources. Now I'll talk a little bit about some of the economics. I was doing a workshop not too long ago, and we talked about a lot of different things, and one of the farmers stood up and said, well, basically it all comes back down to economics. If farmers losing money, they're going to be under a lot of stress, no matter what causes the stress. And that's true in a lot of cases. So let's talk a little bit about the economics. So this plot looks at net farm income since 2000. As many of us know, 2011 to 2013 were record years for farm income, and into 2014 for some industries. Things started to slide in 2014, especially the end of 2014, and has been down ever since. This has led to a situation where net income has declined by about 50% since the peak. As we'll see in a minute, some regions have been hit much harder, and farmers everywhere have taken a hit in net income these past 6 or 7 years. Current predictions show net income to plateau at or near this lower level. And as most of you know, the dairy industry has been hit especially hard. With the current pandemic, the future net cash farm income is really unknown, with a lot of unknowns ahead. In this chart here, since we're doing this webinar from Virginia, I just showed Virginia, but this is all the states. Virginia is currently number 33 in total net farm income. For context, all the way to the left of this graph is California. California has about $15.6 billion in net farm income. This graph shows net farm income in Virginia specifically has declined by nearly $1 billion, or 78% from 2011 through 2016. It went up a little bit in 2017, and then decreased again in 2018 and 2019. So since we're dairy agents, we got to talk about the dairy industry. After 2014, there was a profound and sustained decline in the prices paid to dairy farmers for milk. In many states, the cost farmers incurred to produce milk is higher than the payment they receive for this milk. Many dairy farmers have lost since 2014 an average of $2 to $3 per 100 pounds of milk produced. As you can see from this graph here, it's gone up and down a little bit, but not near the levels of 2014. And currently it looks like the rest of 2020 isn't going to be too great either. Dairy farmers aren't alone though. As you can see from these graphs, corn, soybeans, wheat, they've all shown profound decreases in net farm income. The livestock industry hasn't been spared either. Poultry and cattle are shown in these graphs, and hogs, although I don't have a graph for them, have also been greatly reduced net farm income. All these things combined has contributed to significant amounts of stress on farms. This graph is showing us in gray the median total household income by commodity specialization compared to median household income farming in yellow. The black line is the median household income for all households in the United States at around $63,179. We can see that for some commodities, income from farming makes up a substantial portion of overall household income, such as rice, tobacco, cotton, peanuts, and dairy. Generally, the industries that are very high labor intensive are the ones that have a higher proportion of their income coming from farming. For others, household income from farming is much lower in terms of the farmer's household income. Dairies were the only segment in the U.S. agriculture showing a median total household income that was lower than the national average in 2018. Interestingly, dairy is also the only sector in the U.S. where household income from farming accounts for over 50% of the total household income. The reason for this is based on high operator labor intensity in dairy farming relative to other commodities. So in 2017, an estimated total of more than $300 billion in economic losses were incurred from 16 different weather-related disasters that each totaled more than $1 billion in damage. The past few years have seen many of the worst natural disasters on record, including drought and related fires that seem to have hit the farm country worse than other areas. Fires that destroy farmland and farm animals often translate into more than immediate one-time economic losses to the farmer. It can also wipe out animals and herds that took years to develop. So there's been a lot of flooding in different parts of the country, and in other parts there's been great droughts. And these droughts, again, have caused an increase in fires that have damaged agricultural businesses. This graph here shows the USDA indemnity payments. And as you can see, around 80% of crop losses were weather related. And this is all parts of the United States. On average, it's about 85%. And you can see each region in the United States, what percent of all indemnities are related to each of the causes. So the weather, as most farmers know, causes a lot of stress. You know, it's one of those things you have no control over, and it can be too hot, it can be too cold. We recently here just had some really light frosts destroying some of the farmers' crops. You know, we could have excessive drought and heat later on in the summer. Nobody really knows. Last year, there was flooding in a lot of areas of the United States. This causes great stress on farmers, even though they have no control over it. So in summary, price volatility will continue to exist, and many agricultural markets are bearish for the near future. Many farms are struggling to cover cash flow currently, and it doesn't look good for a few as far out as we can see. Year over year, earned net worth is negative for many in multiple sectors of the agricultural industry. Many farms are in financial distress, putting farm families under prolonged stress, causing mental and physical health issues. If you need help with some of the economic things on some of your farms, or maybe clients you work with, check out your local extension office. You can do things like create a spending plan, look at risk management tools, selecting different insurances, see what personal skills you can turn into off-farm income, and understanding credit and debt. Your local extension agent should be able to help with this. In this section, we'll discuss stress. We'll talk about stress in yourself and stress in other people, family, friends, or people whom you work with. Challenging economic times, coupled with other mitigating factors, high injury rates, low access to health care, the agrarian imperative can drive stress at all levels of the farm and food production chain. In the next sections, we will talk about identifying stress in ourselves and others, managing stress, and communicating through stressful situations. Some amounts of stress can help motivate us to meet a challenge. Stressors generally fall into two groups: acute, disruptive life events, or chronic, ongoing challenges. A person's reaction to stress or coping with stress is often based on a balance between different types of resources one has. This includes material resources, psychological resources like a sense of mastery and self-esteem, and social resources like social support. Think of an action movie. The resources one has are like the shield the superhero holds that defends them from attacks on enemies. The more resources one has, the better it can fare against enemies. Or in this example, stress. The fewer resources one has, the weaker the shield becomes, and the more likely stressors like the impact on mental health. We hope to give you a lot of resources today that put in your toolbox to help you ward off stress. So stress is a need or a demand that is perceived as burdensome or threatening and can lead to physical or mental health problems. Stress affects everybody differently, and many people are affected exactly the same from the same stress. So start learning how you handle stress and how the people you work with, how they handle stress will help you be able to manage it better. So what do you think some examples of stressors for those who work in farming are? Are they chronic or acute? So we've already talked a little bit about weather. This can be both acute and chronic. Weather is a stressor because it can impact how well crops turn out, crop yield, and ultimately how much farmers are able to bring in financially. A major weather event can deeply impact the earning potential for a season. And this could be a prolonged thing like a drought or a short thing like a hurricane. Either way, it can have profound effects on the crop. Large debt loads. Farmers take on debt to expand farming operations for land improvements or repairs, to buy, repair, and replace equipment, to keep the farm running, or to cover operating costs. Loans also may be useful for recovery after natural disasters. Most farmers are well versed in using bankers and debt to manage their operation. Sometimes getting too much debt or an interest rate changes or your income is affected by something else, and all of a sudden farmers find themselves very quickly having debt that they can't repay in a timely way. Government regulations may be a source of stress for many people. They impact many different parts of the farm as a business. This may include regulations about animals, crops, land use, and labor, among other things. Machinery breakdown would be an example of an acute, disruptive event that would require some money and repair skill to resolve. High interest rates on loans may be a source of stress if farmers are unsure how they will manage to pay back the loans that they've generated large amounts of interest. Interest rates change or fluctuate over time. Maybe your mortgage loan is at a good interest rate, but you may slowly be building up some unsecured loans and credit card loans that have a high interest rate. Or maybe the interest rates just change for the banks too. This can be very stressful, especially if you already have large amounts of debt. Crop yield has a direct relationship to financial income to be able to pay bills. Uncertainties related to crop yield, like how to manage pests, could increase stress. Crop farmers, this is directly affects their income. Livestock farmers, this may affect how much they have to feed their animals or how much feed they'll have to buy. Livestock illnesses may be an acute or a chronic stressor. Is the illness something that will recur? How many are ill? What are the consequences? High vet bills, losing livestock. Did you have a disease come through and cause your animals to abort? Are you losing production on your dairy cattle? Are your young stock dying? This can be very stressful for farmers. Sometimes it comes and goes, and you may know how it got there, and you may not. Commodity prices fluctuate over time and impact the financial well-being of the farm. This could be considered a chronic stressor. Again, this is something that you may be able to manage as a farm, but you probably don't have a lot of control over what the commodities are in the market. For livestock producers that buy feed, high commodity prices may be a stressor to them. For crop farmers that are selling crops, low prices would be a stressor to them. And disagreements with family members. Anybody here who ever has worked with family knows that this is a common thing in families. There are many disagreements about important decisions that impact the well-being of the farm. This may be a chronic stressor if these conversations occur often. And with some big decisions, they may be more of an acute stressor. There can be disagreements on whether you should expand the operation or sell some land or buy some land. Or it could just be something where family members just don't get along on a daily basis and it goes on for a long time. There could also be things in some families where there's some underlying issues from years ago that just never got resolved and sort of keep creeping up into family discussions and disagreements. When responsibilities start to pile up on top of each other, farm life can be stressful. During times of stress, family and community members can offer one another a great amount of support. All right, now we're going to show you a short video about how stress affects your body.
Cramming for a test? Trying to get more done than you have time to do? Stress is a feeling we all experience when we are challenged or overwhelmed. But more than just an emotion, stress is a hardwired physical response that travels throughout your entire body. In the short term, stress can be advantageous, but when activated too often or too long, your primitive fight or flight stress response not only changes your brain, but also damages many of the other organs and cells throughout your body. Your adrenal gland releases the stress hormones cortisol, epinephrine, also known as adrenaline, and norepinephrine. As these hormones travel through your bloodstream, they easily reach your blood vessels and heart. Adrenaline causes your heart to beat faster and raises your blood pressure, over time causing hypertension. Cortisol can also cause the endothelium, or inner lining of blood vessels, to not function normally. Scientists now know that this is an early step in triggering the process of atherosclerosis, or cholesterol plaque buildup in your arteries. Together, these changes increase your chances of a heart attack or stroke. When your brain senses stress, it activates your autonomic nervous system. Through this network of nerve connections, your big brain communicates stress to your enteric or intestinal nervous system. Besides causing butterflies in your stomach, this brain-gut connection can disturb the natural rhythmic contractions that move food through your gut. leading to irritable bowel syndrome, and can increase your gut's sensitivity to acid, making you more likely to feel heartburn. Via the gut's nervous system, stress can also change the composition and function of your gut bacteria, which may affect your digestive and overall health. Speaking of digestion, does chronic stress affect your waistline? Well, yes. Cortisol can increase your appetite. It tells your body to replenish your energy stores with energy-dense foods and carbs, causing you to crave comfort foods. High levels of cortisol can also cause you to put on those extra calories as visceral or deep belly fat. This type of fat doesn't just make it harder to button your pants. It is an organ that actively releases hormones and immune system chemicals called cytokines that can increase your risk of developing chronic diseases such as heart disease and insulin resistance. Meanwhile, stress hormones affect immune cells in a variety of ways. Initially, they help prepare to fight invaders and heal after injury, but chronic stress can dampen the function of some immune cells, make you more susceptible to infections, and slow the rate you heal. Want to live a long life? You may have to curb your chronic stress. That's because it has even been associated with shortened telomeres, the shoelace tip ends of chromosomes that measure a cell's age. Telomeres cap chromosomes to allow DNA to get copied every time a cell divides without damaging the cell's genetic code. And they shorten with each cell division. When telomeres become too short, a cell can no longer divide, and it dies. As if all that weren't enough, chronic stress has even more ways it can sabotage your health, including acne, hair loss, sexual dysfunction, headaches, muscle tension, difficulty concentrating, fatigue, and irritability. So, what does all this mean for you? Your life will always be filled with stressful situations, but what matters to your brain and entire body is how you respond to that stress. If you can view those situations as challenges you can control and master, rather than as threats that are insurmountable, you will perform better in the short run and stay healthy in the long run.
All right, so that video there, that nice short video, just kind of showed how stress affects body, how the stress affects a lot of things with your health. So we saw a lot about cortisol in that video. Cortisol is known as the stress hormone and is released in times of fear or stress. Cortisol increases glucose sugars in the bloodstream. It can motivate us to act. However, when cortisol levels remain elevated, perhaps due to chronic stress, this can have detrimental impacts on our health. Cortisol alters our immune system, suppresses digestive and reproductive systems, and suppresses growth processes. Cortisol changes our mood, fears, and motivation. Health problems associated with higher cortisol levels include heart disease, lowered immune system response, digestive problems, sleep problems, issues with memory and concentration, weight gain, anxiety, depression, and a lower life expectancy. So I can't really do a demonstration here, but you can see in this photo here, there's a picture of what we could do for a demonstration. The jar on the left has clear water. So when you're not under a lot of stress and you don't have a lot of cortisol in your system, you can see clearly, you can think clearly. You know, your mind just isn't very foggy. But if you add dirt or something cloudy to the water and you shake it up and gets this in that water, it just kind of shows what your thoughts and your actions are very cloudy. Now, if you leave it sit for a few minutes, it'll settle out and become less cloudy again. But if you're constantly shaking up that jar with the dirt that's in there, you're always going to be cloudy in your decisions and maybe making poor decisions. So what does stress look like? How do you know when you are feeling stressed? What are your physical, mental, emotional, or social signs of stress? So just take a moment to think about what some of your symptoms of stress are, what your physical symptoms are, your emotional symptoms, behavioral, how do you act when you get under stress, your cognitive, what do you think when you're under stress, and how do you feel about your self-worth? Take a moment to think about these in yourself, but also in others that you are working with. And think about what others are experiencing when they experience stress. So here's a list. Some physical signs could be headaches, ulcers, backaches, eating problems, sleeping disorders, frequent sickness, or exhaustion. Some emotional ones could be sadness, depression, bitterness, anger, anxiety, loss of spirit, loss of sense of humor. Behavioral could be irritability, backbiting, acting out, passive aggressiveness, anger, increased drinking, taking drugs, isolation, or violent behavior. Cognitive could be just memory loss, or loss of concentration, or difficulty with seemingly simple decisions. And self-worth, you feel like a failure, like you can't do anything right, like you can't fix anything. So these are all signs of stress. And it's important that everybody has different signs of stress. So it's important to understand how you deal with stress and what some of your signs and symptoms are, and some of the people, your family's members, your friends, some of the people you work with, your coworkers, clients, how they deal with it. Understanding these signs and symptoms can help manage them and help you to help somebody else. When farm families are stressed out for long periods of time and have chronic, prolonged stress, they may experience a number of signs and symptoms. You may be able to see these signs and symptoms in farm families you see on a day-to-day basis. These symptoms can lead to chronic illnesses such as high blood pressure, heart disease, hypertension, and type 2 diabetes. So here's another resource for you. On the left side of this slide, I have the link to the publication that's pictured here, How Stress Affects You. And this is just a list of all the things that we went over on the last slide. So how does stress affect you? What are your physical, mental, emotional, and social signs? Many farmers experience financial and emotional stress because of economic hardships. There are several signs or symptoms signaling when a farm family may be in need of help. These signs can be observed by friends, extended family, neighbors, milk haulers, vets, clergy, school personnel, health and human service workers, and others. Some of them include a change in routine. For example, the farmer or farm family stops attending church, drops out of 4-H as a leader, no longer stops in the local coffee shop, or feed mill, and other changes. Care of their livestock declines. Cattle may not be cared for in the usual way. They may lose condition, appear gaunt, or show signs of neglect or physical abuse. Especially if you work with a farmer, usually that was one thing they take a lot of pride in is the care of their cattle, and you see this starting to happen. It should be worrisome if you're working with that producer, and they may need some help. Increases in illness. Farmer or farm family member may experience more upper respiratory illnesses or other chronic conditions. Increase in accidents. The risk of farm accidents increases due to fatigue or loss of ability to concentrate. Children may be at risk if there isn't adequate child care. Again, some of this could be just from fatigue. Some of this could be from making poor decisions from being under chronic stress due to cortisol in your bloodstream. Appearance of farmstead declines. Again, if you have a farmer that really takes a lot of pride in how their farm looks and all of a sudden they're not keeping up with weeds or not mowing the lawn, not taking care of flower beds they usually did, this could be a sign of some severe depression or signs of severe stress. Children show signs of stress. Farm children may act out, may show a decline in academic performance, will be increasingly absent from school. They may also show signs of physical abuse or neglect. There was recently a study that came out that showed that even when the parents are trying to hide their stress, the children know that it's happening. So they start to see signs of stress as well. Sometimes you'll see children, even if they've been abused, where they're actually defending their parents and making excuses for them. It's important to take all these signs seriously. Here's another resource. This one is specifically on youth farm stress. And again, on the left side is the link to the handout, and then there's a picture of the handout. So this is a really good resource if you work with children or if you're around farms with children there. Children are very resilient, but they also can show signs of stress, and it can have long-term effects on their health as well. So we've talked a lot about stress, signs of stress, and identifying stress in ourselves. What are ways we can handle stress? So at the bottom of this page is the link to the photo here, stress. And it's a very good handout, so if you get a chance, you can go ahead and download this. But think brain, breathe, relax, ask, imagine, and after doing those 4 things, ask yourself how you feel. So BRAIN is a very good acronym. So breathing. Breathing, research shows that breathing can help reduce the effects of stress. There are 2 breathing exercises that can help us to reset. One is called box breathing. For example, breathe in for 4 seconds, hold it for 4 seconds, breathe out for 4 seconds, hold it for 4 seconds. You can do that several times in a row, and it leaves the cortisol still out of your bloodstream and helps you think clearly. Another breathing exercise is called the 3-breath reset. On the first breath, take a deep breath. Focus on filling your lungs with air. On the second breath, breathe in and feel the tension in your body. When you exhale, release all the tension you noticed. On the third breath, as you inhale all the good energy in the room, and exhale positive energy to those around you. Again, breathing has been shown to reduce stress in most individuals, and it's a very easy and zero cost and very little time thing to do that you can do on your own or with others. So self-talk means paying attention to our internal monologue and the kinds of things that we say to ourselves. It means treating ourselves with the compassion we extend to others. Some examples may be I can do it, or I've got this, or I can figure this out. Remember, the things that you're telling yourself are the things you're listening to. So if you're always thinking negatively, or having negative thoughts, it'll really make your mood worse versus having positive thoughts all the time. And this has to be intentional sometimes, especially in stressful situations. Exercise has been shown to help release stress from the body, as well as talking to mental health professionals can help you manage stress as well. So at the bottom of this page, I have 2 more links to resources that you can use. You can also connect with people in your social network, just farmer groups, church groups, meeting people at a local coffee shop whenever we're allowed to do that again. So any of these things can reduce stress. In a sample of 190 farmers and ranchers, lower levels of social support result in higher depression scores. Providing social support means promoting effective communication with others. You can organize and promote social support opportunities like events and coffee talks. Break down the stigma related to mental health treatment. So it's one of the things with the current stay-at-home orders, we're starting to see less of an opportunity for farmers or any groups to meet up to just talk about some of the problems they're having, which is, again, shown to reduce depression and stress. What we need to do is encourage our farmers and their families to talk to each other about what is making them stressed out. It is essential that they talk to their partner, family, or neighbors. Talking will engage them in getting help to take on some of what is causing them stress. It may help to relieve some of the stress-related symptoms they could be experiencing. Things like farm commodity groups, farm shows, extension or commodity-led workshops not only help to share problems, but can also be a good source to find a new solution. What can you and your organization do to help with social support for the farmers you work with? So identifying your social support system. So here's another handout with a link on the left and a picture of it, is how to cultivate a productive mindset. This goes over some of the things we've already talked about, like using self-talk and using acceptance. And also using your breath. So these are more resources for you, and we hope that you'll use them. All right, I'm going to pass the baton over to Cynthia, and she's going to give the rest of the presentation.
Thank you. Jeremy, can you still hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay, I'm going to share my screen right now. So now I'm going to talk to you guys about what we can do to talk and communicate with farmers under stress. So if you're an ag professional, or whether you're a nutritionist, vet, loan officer, somebody that works for the USDA, milk inspector, any of those, this is what some of the things you can do while working with your farmers who may be struggling with high levels of stress. So how many of you would feel comfortable and confident in yourself that you could intervene with a farmer who you sensed is being severely stressed on the farm? If you're one of those individuals who believes you can do that, then you're on track. But if you're somebody that doesn't think that, we're going to give you some things that you can do. So in the next few minutes, we will talk to you about preparing how to approach someone who seems to be under a great deal of stress, how you can begin a dialogue with them to find out the problem. We will focus on the process of what we call active listening. Research has shown, and experience also, it tells us that listening can be the most valuable action you can take during this situation. The most useful form of listening is active listening, because it helps the person you are trying to help know that you're really listening. And it can also be done in a way that helps the person define the situation and develop a personal action plan to address it. If you're one of these people that are in constant contact with your farmers, whether you're your dairy farmers, beef, grain crop farmers, they tend to talk to you a lot. Maybe they'll talk to you and communicate more with you than some of their spouses. So they tend to open up, and that's when you really want to listen to them and take to heart what they're saying. So we're going to suggest some things that you can do or not do when you're in in a tight situation. We're also going to talk about how to prepare an action plan. So how you can go forward when stepping out on a farm. You might think you're going there to talk about nutrition, and you might think you have a 30-minute plan there and you're only going to be there for 30 minutes to talk to that farmer. When you get out there, plans might change and you might be there for 2 hours talking about that they're redoing a room in their house, or that something broke on the farm, and you might really find out a lot of things that are going on. So we want you to think and plan ahead. We want you to ask yourself some questions. Why are you going? Who are you going to meet? What might you encounter when you get to the farm? What can you help them with? How much time is needed? You might think you're only going there for 30 minutes, but I always say plan a little extra. How much time are you willing to commit? If you think you can only go out there for 30 minutes, but that farmer might have other things to tell you, you really need to understand that they're there to do their business, but they also like to have outside contact. And so you might want to commit a little extra, maybe double or triple your time. Do you yourself have the resources to deal with some of the things that are going on at the farm? Whether that's things on the farm or that's maybe some personal issues that the farmer might be having. What is their preferred method to receive information? Are they, when you go out to give them information, do they prefer a book, short paper, phone, internet website? Those are all the things you have to take into account. Both Jeremy and I work with farmers that we can't give them a website. We have to provide them with handouts, or we call them. So that might limit the things you can get to them and the ways to get it to them. How can you be of value to them? Think about your short and long-term goals for yourself, but also for that farmer. Because once you've made the decision to get involved, but before you go out to approach that person, you really need to spend some time thinking about how you're going to help this person. Go through and ask yourself and answer these questions that we just given to you. This is going to help you set up a game plan. Your game plan could be to answer most of the questions prior to your visit with the person. For instance, why are you going there? Are you going to look at the corn? Are you going to look at the cows? Or are you going to meet them about expanding or selling out? Those are some tough decisions a farmer has to make. Looking at the corn and the cows can be a whole different scenario versus expanding their farm or selling out. Each of these questions can have very different responses from the family, and answering each of these questions in your head prior to going to the meeting or the farm visit can help you better prepare. And I'm hoping this link is going to work. The understanding and having the proper mindset when you go to the farm is really key. So you have to think about some things. Do you have empathy? Because they don't need sympathy. So you have to understand the difference between empathy and sympathy. Do you know all the answers? What is likely the response if you do? I wouldn't say everybody knows every single answer to every question a farmer is going to ask. So make sure you know how to find them the correct information. Can you help them think? Can you help them discover and live without possible outcomes of a decision that could be made? Can you help put that farmer in the proper mindset if he's out there telling you he needs to sell out? What are the next steps? You can help him discover and live his life in that possible outcome that he's not going to be a dairy farmer anymore, or a beef farmer, or a crop farmer. So let's see. We're going to get this video over here. 1 second. Maybe. Well, my meeting controls have disappeared from my screen. Well, we're just going to keep going then. You should be able to click on the link here. And this is a short video talking to you about the different about empathy. In the video, you hear the differences between empathy and sympathy, and you want to really listen to those differences. You want to think about, as you go about the process and you're going about your plan, consider your own mindset and the sort of mental posture that you're going to bring. You have to think about, when you go, prior to going out to any farm, do you feel like you can offer empathy to someone? Can you think of things from their perspective? You might discover quickly that this person that you're going to visit is in a critical situation. Were you ready for that when you went out to the farm? You may be tempted to become sympathetic with them. However, sympathy is not always useful and helpful. So we want to make sure that they get all their answers, all their questions answered. They need answers, but they need to play an active role in coming up with those answers. You should not be giving them all the answers. They need to think of them, because it ensures to them that there's a level of commitment required for going forward. We do not want to push them into any position. We want them to think of it. We want to help them. Can we help them think and discover and make sure they live with those outcomes that they've come up with? So the goal, anytime you go out on a farm, is open, honest dialogue. We want to make sure that we're communicating through conflict that involves dialogue. It's going to be the open, honest communication, and it involves a lot of listening. It takes practice. So we're going to remember that we have to have skills. First, we want to preserve the relationship. If you've been working with these farmers for years and years, you have a built-in relationship with those farmers. They are there to talk to you, and you're there to talk to them. They feel a connection with you, and they've built trust within you. So for this open conversation, you need to tell the facts and impact on yourself and others without judgment or blame. You want to be able to explain the outcomes you want. I'd really like us to resolve this in a way that can work for both of us when you're thinking about it. You also want to ask for views from others. How do you see the situation? Questions like, what am I missing? Secondly, we want to create safety, and doing this is during our listening. We want to have a dialogue that's open, honest communication. We can probe for questions and answers. The question like, can you tell me more? We're probing them to try to get them to think more. We restate. We want to restate the questions and the answers. Is this what you said? This makes sure on both ourselves and the farmer, we're understanding correctly what's being said. And you can ask them to restate it more than once. Paraphrase. In other words, you could say, in other words, I'm hearing blank. Did I get that right? And then we want to go through and summarize. We're going to take that and go, from what you're saying, I sense there's a feeling blank. Maybe there's a feeling of discourse. There's a feeling of joy. There's a feeling of relief. Is that correct? Is that right? The third thing we do when we're creating our goals is to develop a shared purpose. And this is going to resolve things. We're helping to resolve things. So some of the things you want to think about is commit to staying in a dialogue by asking, are you willing to? The question you can ask is, are you willing to? Uncover others' interests, the reason behind the position each is taking. You want to ask questions like, why do you want to do that? If there's more than one person involved in the farm, make sure you're getting the open, honest dialogue and communication from everybody that's involved. The next thing you want to think about is reframe, a mutual purpose with the both and thinking parts. Questions like, how can I satisfy both your needs and your mind? What do we both care about? And then the last thing you're going to do in developing the shared purpose is encourage them to brainstorm. Both things that are going on and the situations and solutions. So we want to brainstorm all areas that we can go through. Sorry about that, I forgot one. And then we want to encourage that we don't forget to apologize when you've made a mistake. We want to have that open dialogue. So if there's a mistake being made, make sure we honor that and we apologize for it. Use contrast when needed. That is, when you've misunderstood something, use don't/do the language. So don't do in the language, do don't language. An example of this would be, I don't want you to think I don't value our team. I do want us to talk more openly about our team problems. We want to encourage those do-don't languages. The best thing you can do is practice all these skills, and that will help you get better in communicating through conflict. So practice, practice, practice. Now we're going to talk about some active listening skills along with this. The most important skill is to listen. And when I talk about that, I mean really listen to people. If you're going out to the farm, don't have your cell phone with you in hand and have it going off a million times and taking other phone calls or playing on Facebook or YouTube videos or TikTok. We want to be able to listen to those farmers with full intent when we go out there. So use your empathy and truly listen for their feelings. You could find out a lot from what a person is feeling by listening to them. Because most people do not listen with the intent to understand. They listen with the intent to reply to an answer, to a question or an answer. So this is how we're going to continue our active listening. We're going to ask. Asking often when conversation starts, when someone is invited to say something through their voice or another communication mode. We're going to probe or guess. This is another way to gently gather more information to help one understand. Attend. We're attending. We're meeting, we're paying attention, noticing the conventional and unconventional signals, the linguistic and non-linguistic expressions, and the spoken or other communication modes. We're going to ask for reinstatement. We're going to ask to reinstate. This is simply repeating what one thinks was said. If you need to do this more than once, do it. Paraphrase. We're going to paraphrase using one's own words to reinstate what the speaker said. We're going to summarize. Summarizing is paraphrasing, but it's also adding in the emotion that seemed to be expressed by the speaker. Reframing. We're going to reframe the statement in a neutral, unbiased term, what one thinks the speaker really wants. So this is another way we're going to help improve on our active listening. Some phrases you might use during your active listening to make you think about what you can do when you go on the farm is that you can work with this within your organization to work on these things, but some of the things you can look at is, I can see the current situation is hard for you. What changes would you like to see? I'm eager to help you. I know you were going through some tough challenges. Tell me what I can help with. I hear you saying, in blank. It sounds like you were thinking that blank, and that could be it. It sounds like you were thinking you need to sell your farm. It sounds like you're thinking you need to put in a new bedded pack barn, or you need to put in another crop besides corn. So these are some of the things you want to make sure you're doing when you're active listening, is ask those questions. At times we have stressful situations. We got to think about, what do you do? Here are some suggestions for what to do during stressful situations. Comments you can make while listening and supporting the person you are hearing. I know several farms in similar situations. Remind the farmer that he's not the only one going through that situation. His next door neighbor may be going through the same situation, and I always encourage the farmers to get out and talk to each other. Every situation is a little different, but you want to make sure that you help me understand better. Another question you can think about is, have you thought about? These are the open-ended questions that you can use. Have you thought about buying a used tractor, not a new tractor? Another question you could ask, I could maybe help you with. This is where extension comes in, and we can say we can maybe help you write a new financial plan, look at your cow's diet, help you with your crop fields. There's a lot of things that this question can be used for. Another one would be, I think that we could do a little better job at taking care of your calves if we do this or that. Make sure you have the answers for them. This new idea might increase your profit. What do you think? And the best thing you can do is write things down. So you want to make sure you can encourage your farmers to write things down, the pros and the cons. Keep a list of those pros and cons of everything they're thinking of and their goals. Here are some additional stressful situations that people experience. People under stress typically don't process things as well as expected, and they can be easily overloaded. We want to make sure we're being sensitive to help people organize information in a way that can enable them to remember and process what was discussed. And we want to make sure that the consensus is reached. And if, like I said, if there's more than one person involved in the farm, we want to make sure that the process is discussed with everybody and the consensus is reached with everybody and that they all are in agreement. You also want to make sure when you're visiting a farm and you're working with them, timely follow-up with written communication reviewing what is discussed is critical. Remember, a farmer doesn't always have the best memory when he's stressed, so writing things down for them and mailing it back to them or emailing it to them is very important so they have a detailed list of what you guys talked about. And it also works really well for you. You also want to make sure you have patience as you talk through options, decisions, and plans with your clients and customers. Remember to listen. Listening is key. You may have to grasp on the reality of the situation, but because of the real and measurable impact of stress on perceptions, your client and customers will likely not see this situation as clearly. So you might see that plan B or plan B works better than plan A, but your farmer might not see that because of the situation he's currently in. So make sure you have detailed descriptions for them. Here are some more do's. It's critical that you follow up if you said you would. And it's also critical to follow up if you said, if you didn't say you would. When people are in chronic stress, they need to know that someone cares about them, and making a simple phone call or stopping in to say hi goes a long way. So what in your current role can you do? It's critical that you answer for yourself the question of what role can you do? What role can I take in this farmer's operation? And if I hear more than I can handle, what role do I take next? You don't want to promise things you cannot deliver. Your main role is to help them identify and tap into resources they need to get through their crisis that they're going through. Dealing with stress requires a holistic or team approach. So we want to make sure to involve the people with the appropriate expertise, considering issues of finance, production, or other technical specialties. I like to tell people, put together a farm advisory team with everybody involved in your farm. Your loan officer, your nutritionist, your vet, anybody that you feel is important. You do not want to overlook the roles of the health professionals, including the mental health professionals. You can find resources within your own community that you can be familiar with and that you can put your clients and customers in touch with. Now we're going to talk about the relationship between chronic stress and suicide. What is that relationship between chronic stress and suicide? Chronic stress can be very difficult to deal with and can build up over time and have a profound impact on the person's physical and mental health. When dealing with chronic stress, it may be very difficult for people to see solutions to problems they are facing, and they may feel trapped, helpless, or hopeless. We've talked about communication, the listening, the social support, and the coping skills. It's very important that you are aware of suicide warning signs and are prepared if you're ever in that situation when you go to a farm, or your neighbor, your fellow employees, and coworkers. We have discussed some stressors previously by Jeremy, including the economic ones and the communicating with your farmers. Now we're going to talk about the relationship between chronic stress and suicide. And we do know that this can be a very awkward conversation, one that most of us do not like to have. So before we get into this section, I would like to briefly talk about language. During our conversations, we talked to you guys about suicide. You will hear me use the phrase die by suicide or took their own life. We try to encourage people not to use the word committed or successful suicide. That's one way you want to think about why we want to choose our language importantly. The reasons why we do this is commit is often associated with things like crime or sin and has a negative stigmatizing connotation. We do not want to stigmatize that people are trying to connect with. We do not want to use successful when we're talking about suicide, as suicide is not something we want people to be successful at. And it is never a success when someone dies by suicide. What we're trying to do is break the stigmatism that people can't address this and talk about it. What are some of the warning signs that you're aware of related to suicide? Can you think of those? Suicide warning signs vary from individuals. These are a few of the common warning signs. Talking or writing about suicide or death, feeling hopeless, trapped, or like a burden to their family or friends, giving away prized possessions. One of the things I like to say is an example would be if you had a friend or family member that had a prized baseball collection, and every time when you were a little kid, you always asked for that prized baseball, and they always said, no, that was a prized possession, we'll never give it away. And all of a sudden something changes in their demeanor as you get older and things happen, and they give that prized possession away. That could be a sign if you've noticed other signs of stress. Making a plan and acquiring means. Saying goodbyes, isolation from others, loss of interest, changes in mood. Other things could be acting recklessly, increased drug and alcohol use, sleep changes, being obnoxious or agitated. or anxious. When someone makes statements about suicide, they may be direct and easy to interpret, or they may be indirect and difficult to interpret. Here are some coded and clear warning signs that a person may hear. Remember to use your skills that we talked about earlier in the presentation, especially with empathy and active listening, if you do happen to hear any of these examples. They might say clear to a friend, "I'm going to kill myself." They might say to their child, "Don't be surprised if I die in a tractor rollover." To their banker, they might ask the question or say, "If you foreclose, you'll be seeing my obituary next week." To a close friend, maybe even you as an ag professional, "If I shall pass away, I want you to have my old Winchester 12 gauge. Another thing that could be coded toward their financial advisor or loan officer is, "What happens to all my debt if I die?" So if you're somebody that they're saying these questions to, you really need to stop, listen, and find them help. Some other examples they might say are, "Is there enough medicine to kill somebody?" This could be considered an indirect if they're saying it to their doctor. They say, talk to their dentist, "When I can't go to sleep like this, I don't give a blank about life." Maybe to their adult son, but not their younger child, "I'm going to be leaving you with nothing. I'm afraid just my burdens." As farmers take on a lot of stress and debt load, and they might not know how they're going to handle it when they pass it on to their next generation. They might say to their other child, "You need to look after your mother when I'm gone." To a best friend or a pastor, no warning signs may be sent. To his wife, they might just say indirectly, "Why don't I just shoot myself and let the bank have this place?" When talking to one farmer that I've had attend one of these meetings, he strongly believed we needed to start out the beginning of this program for our farmers that we do, talking about the what ifs if you commit suicide and how it leaves your family members. Another thing is how do we ask somebody about suicide? We got to think about things. You might need to know how to ask somebody directly about their thoughts of suicide, and that's okay. Asking directly does not increase the risk of suicide and may provide the person with some sort of relief that somebody sees their struggles. The questions on this screen is one way to ask someone whether they're thinking about suicide. You can ask them directly, "Are you having thoughts of suicide?" Asking directly, like I said, does not increase the risk of suicide, and it may provide that person with the relief that someone sees their struggles. But what happens if we ask that question? What is it like to ask that question? Some people feel concerned when asking this question. What if somebody says yes? If someone says yes, do not leave that person alone. Call for help and take them to a hospital or a healthcare provider. Calling for help may mean calling the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline, a family member, a community mental health organization, or other healthcare providers, or 911 if for emergency medical services. If somebody says yes to you, find them the help that they need. So like I said, if somebody says yes when you ask them this question directly, do not leave them alone. This number listed here is the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline number. This is manned 24/7, 365 days a year, all the time. If you remember one thing from this workshop, remember to never leave a distressed person alone. Call the person's friend or family member, or even dial 911. The National Suicide Prevention Lifeline is a really good resource. This number will reroute calls to regional call centers when needed. All the responders through the Lifeline have been trained in how to talk with people experiencing distress and who may be thinking of suicide. They can make suggestions to the person about what to do to get help. The American Foundation of Suicide Prevention also has great resources that can be downloaded and added to your computer if you need them in your toolbox. These are also some other helpful numbers and websites that you guys can reach for in-depth learning about mental health and first aid and suicide prevention classes. Another great resource for any professional or anybody for that matter is the mental health first aid class. Now to review. Farmers can have stress due to experiencing extreme economic conditions, weather-related emergencies, and other reasons, and may not seek help, in part due to the lack of medical resources that are available. Chronic stress is a common response to challenging economic conditions farmers face. Listening to them with empathy is the most useful and helpful thing you can do for somebody going through extreme stress. Positive talk, mindful breathing, and acceptance are proven coping skills. And Jeremy went through those breathing exercises with you. Never leave a distressed person alone. Call a friend, family member, or even 911. The big question is, would you be able to deal with a friend or family member or a client under extreme stress? With that, we do have a survey that we would like for you guys to fill out now that we're done giving our presentation. We typically have people fill out a paper survey and leave it for us. But since this talk is being done online and recorded, there is a link to a Qualtrics survey through Virginia Tech for you to answer your questions, answer the survey for us. This survey helps us better improve our programming. Here's just a quick recommended resource for you. If you'd like to find out more information, you can go to several of these resources that are provided by Michigan State, as well as the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention. There's a lot of great handouts here, and I encourage you to print them off and use them. And with that, if you have any questions, you can submit those to Jeremy and I via our email. And Jeremy, I'm done, and I'll let you take control of the screen.
Okay, thanks, Cynthia. And I just shared our contact information here again. Again, like Cynthia said, feel free to reach out to us if you have any questions or if you want a copy of these PowerPoints. If you're from not in the area or from a different state, feel free to reach out to your local extension offices. Many states are working on local mental health resources for farmers. And if you can't get a hold of them, again, feel free to reach out to Cynthia or I, and we'll help connect you with your local resources. So thanks again for watching this.